Okay, good afternoon, I think, everyone. I'm told I have to use this mic because we're also streaming, so the sound come out for those listening from the internet. So my name's Llewellyn Hughes. I'm a faculty member, actually, up at the Graduate School at the ANU, to participate in the Australia-Germany Energy Transition Hub work, which is going on the ANU and the University of Melbourne as partners, and I'm a visitor here at the Climate College. And I'm really excited to have Masa Sugiyama come and speak with us today from the University of Tokyo. As you know, Japan is an extraordinarily important partner for Australia in both trade and investment in the energy sector. You know, tens of billions of dollars of aid in thermal coal, tens of billions of dollars worth of trade in LNG, and also obviously in iron ore, an energy intensive sector of the economy. So there's a really crucial trading relationship between the two countries. At the same time, Japan's energy system itself is going through some significant changes. And so what the future energy picture looks like for Japan is also really flux. In 2011, as you know, on March the 11th, there was a large tsunami and nuclear disaster, and as a result of that, all of Japan's nuclear were shut down. They supplied, depending on the year, around 30% of generated electricity into the electricity system. And the restarts of nuclear power plants in Japan has been slow and far slower than the government of Japan would wish. And that's likely to continue to be the case in the future. So currently, in 2030, a generation of targets that the government has, it's saying that it wants to see nuclear power at around 20 to 22% of generated electricity. But it's probably a reasonable estimate. I think that it's going to look more like 10% at most. In addition, you have a 40-year regulated limit on the lifetime of nuclear in Japan. That can be extended to 60 years if approved by the nuclear safety regulator. But what that means is if you don't start building new ones, then by mid-century or a little later, you're going to see nuclear power really play a small part, like trending to zero within Japan's electric mix. And electricity is a huge part of Japan's emissions profile. So, the enormous question for Japan now, which is what to fill that gap. And there are a few options there, right? One, energy efficiency, which Japan is good at, so you can cut, bring demand down, and actually in the 2030 targets, there's very aggressive efficiency targets associated with that. Obviously, coal and gas potential contenders, and then there's the renewable sector, as well as hydrogen, which Australia is very excited about, a potential export market, exporting carbon to Japan right now. So, which one of those are going to win as a function of regulation? Which one of those are going to win as a function of price? And which are going to win as a function of, kind of engineering problems around grid structure and so on and so forth are really open questions today. And I think that there's more that we could know in Australia about what that future picture look like. So, as I said, it's terrific to have Masa come and speak with us today. Masa is really of the leading modelers in Japan, who is using modeling to try and understand what the range of possible outcomes might be for Japan's emission profile moving to mid-century and beyond. I think we have an hour, so we will have a good time for questions. Masa has also worked at the research institute focused specifically in the electric power industry before moving into the academic space. so also has a lot to, a lot about electricity market and electricity sector, and also works in geoengineering. So if you're interested in that, then he can probably field the questions. But for now, let me thank Masa again, and had him talk to us about mitigation scenarios. Thanks.
Thank you, Llewellyn. The microphone work for the internet connection. Oh, hi. Yeah, that. So, thanks a lot, and I would like to thank the organizers for hosting me here. So it is my great place to talk about my own work and to join work with different many different people. So you can see I won't give all the names of these people, but you can them here. And so today's title is evaluating climate change mitigation policy of Japan, a multi-approach. So the approach I'm going to use today is multiple models. And going to see, in a minute why this is necessary. And this is actually a very conventional approach in climate change science. And increasingly, this is also true for mitigation and action space. So, and so I'd like to acknowledge our funder. Our primary funder is the Environmental Research and Technology Development Fund of Environmental Restoration Conservation Agency. It is under the Ministry of the Environment, Japan. So by the way, I wanted to touch on my Australian connection. When I was a high school student, I had to stay here, and also that recently I got an interview with the ABC for video. So anyway, that's this introduction. Yeah. So I'm not sure about how much you're familiar with the Japanese energy / policy. Just a short primer. Japan is a democracy, but the bureaucrats and the policymakers have huge influence on the policy direction. So some political scientists call it bureaucracy-led mass inclusion pluralism. And some major players in the politics is necessary politician. Actually, there's some environmental zoku, the tribes, if you will. But the key players are Ministry of Economy, the Trade and Industry, and the another one is of the environment. And METI tend to have more power than the Ministry of the Environment. So if you want to understand where Japan is going, I think that's a background you have to keep in mind. And ministries are not subject to elections, so they are. In a sense, their policies are more stable, but their changes are slow. So that's one thing. And this is the more quantitative things, but so the level instead, we have been changing our energy policy greatly after the disaster in 2011. And on the nuclear side, we tightened up the safety regulation. That's one of the reasons why nuclear power plants got shut down after the disaster. And it has been harder for the government to restart these plants, partly because of the regulation. The other is partly from partly it has been very difficult for the local consent from governments. Power sector has seen a lot of changes, and I think some people are worried that Japan is doing too much at the same time. Probably we could have a focus on renewables only, but we first liberalize the market. So full retail liberalization started in 2016, and in April this year, we have to unbundle all the utilities, and this is most important piece of policy after the Fukushima disaster. But we just full-fledged feed-in tariff scheme in 2012, and that led to a huge expansion of solar, mostly. And thankfully, thanks to this, now we are switching to auction scheme for large-scale utility solar. And because of the large expansion of solar, I have started experiencing the difficulty incorporating a large penetration renewables. It is always hard to incorporate a lot of variable renewables. So Kyushu, one of the southernmost islands, and so they started really curtailing the solar production. The regulations are going to change to allow for more flexible usage network. And in R&D, we've been emphasizing the hydrogen lately, but of course we are doing other things. And so this is the main topic today. So for 2030, our goal is to reduce emissions of 26%. By the way, so this is for greenhouse gases, but for my talk, I will focus on the energy-related CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, because it is 90% of these emissions. We have agriculture, of course, and we have like non-CO2 emissions, but that portion is rather small in Japan. And many people have criticized this government plan, and perhaps most significant, one of the most significant issues is the role of nuclear at level that they talked about. I will come back to this in my, later today, but yeah, it's hard to use this one. As a new technology, I came from the 20th century. Yeah, so the industry, heavy industry, unlike other European American counterparts, Japan has a huge percent of heavy industry, steel making, cement, and the petrochemicals, and they emit a significant amount of carbon dioxide emissions. And according to the government plan, the share of industry in emissions of final energy, it is going to increase. And this is the reversal of past trend. In the past, we've seen the decreasing trend for industry, but it's quite difficult for us to reduce emissions in the industry sector. So we rely on emissions reduction in other sectors, buildings, and transportation. So it is, I think, not this problem not just for Japan. It's true for other East Asian countries like South Korea and China, but it is definitely a problem for us. And last year in June, the Japanese government submitted its mid-century strategy, and our goal is to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050. And also, the mid-century strategy also talked about net zero emissions sometime in the latter half of the 21st century. We haven't picked up the date yet. In terms of policy instruments, we have carbon pricing, but the price is rather low, and stringent carbon price is not in sight. This has been a very contentious issue, and the Ministry of Economy, they do not like it. That's my reading. And the Ministry of the Environment, they would push for it, but it's not the official agenda yet. So you can ask about the question. So how Japan is going to achieve 26% emissions reduction without any kind of stringent policy? It's a very open question. And for the industry, we have relied on the voluntary action from the industry sector, and it's actually it's kind of interesting, but it's been working. So industry, heavy industry, has been reducing, at least, improving its own energy efficiency overall. But the energy efficiency is one thing, fuel switching is another. So how can they achieve more emissions reduction? That's another issue. And also sorry, I said I want to remove this, but in energy efficiency standards, we have a famous program called Top Runner program, and we covers up seasons, even no fields. So it's been working well, but I think this is now I'm talking at the energy transition hub between the Australia and Germany, and compare the Germany against Japan. We are doing okay when it comes to energy efficiency, but when it comes to renewables, we are not that okay. So energy efficiency, we are okay. That's great, but more issue is to do with the sort of fuel switching. Yeah. So now to the modeling studies. Before talking about the multimodal studies, I'd like to highlight some new modeling studies that have used single models. And these are also good, but of course, each methodology has strengths and weaknesses. So I'd like to highlight some of the important the insights coming out of studies. And So this shows the network structure of the power sector in Japan. Maybe you know this, but we have two different frequencies. So 50 hertz on the side, and the 60 hertz on the western side. And of course, it's quite difficult for us to use the network so effectively. And what's more, you can see the names of the different like utility companies, Tokyo and Chubu. These are local monopolies in the past, and now they are increasingly we see an increase of the retail law, but still they are the dominant forces in the power sector. And because they were local monopolies in the past, the connection between the regional, like these big companies, is not strong. For instance, so Kyushu, this island, this has experienced a huge expansion of solar, which is a good thing. But this option is very weak. So they can't, when they have excess electric generation here, they can't export that electricity here, or when they have like low level of generation, they can't. So it's difficult. And so, of course, theoretically, you can strengthen and build on network connections, transmission lines. But the question is, who's going to pay for it, right? And that's a huge question. This situation is very different from that of Europe, for instance. So when Germany and many countries have seen huge penetration of renewables, but to some extent, because of this strong power network, they can so they can do exchange electricity among the network, so depending countries, not necessarily true. We can, of course, like I said, strengthen the network, but it's not happening right now. So it's gonna be the future issue. And this is a pretty trendy thing in modeling the space. So I'm sure it's happening here, and also a lot of studies have been done in Europe too. But we also did, my colleagues, Kami-san and Fuji-san, and they ran a one-hour resolution model to look at the possibility of incorporating a huge level of renewables. So this corresponds to the Hokkaido in May. And okay, because of it's hard to see, but it's a black line. No, right. The load is here demand, and you can see excess generation by solar, and then we have to suppress wind, or we have to suppress solar, and it is already this is also happening in Kyushu. And just want to say this. But the question is, solar PV only generates electricity when there's sunshine. And actually, this flexibility, incorporating, adjusting to this plan is doable if you have batteries and other things. More difficult question is, what you do when there's no wind or no sunshine, and that's a harder issue. And that's where things like hydrogen could be important. So this study basically uses a quite similar modeling framework, but they look at the implications of hydrogen import, perhaps Australia. So zero carbon hydrogen from Australia. There's a number of R&D projects between Japan and Australia to look at the possibility of importing hydrogen generated in Australia here to Japan. And so this is sort of consistent with the kind of the R&D project. And so you can see horizontal axis are the same between these two panels, and this is zero means zero hydrogen hydrogen fired power. This is 600, so this is like a terawatt hours. And they change the level of hydrogen fired power plants. So hydrogen in this scenario, it's used to generate electricity. It's not used to run vehicles, for instance. So this is for power generation. And then this is you can see you can increase the hydrogen generation, and the rest of it is supplied by the zero carbon emission, zero carbon power plants. So this is about the power generation mix. So what's more interesting in the cost, and you see on the right panel it's electricity generation cost. And if you don't allow for any hydrogen, the cost is quite expensive. So 20 yen per kilowatt hour. If you have a decent amount of hydrogen, you can reduce the cost quite significantly. So that's actually a very important message for this kind of modeling, detailing analysis. And I think hydrogen is not the only source. I think the key feature here is you need to have some dispatchable electricity generation source. And also wind, solar PV, all these variable renewables are great, but they are not dispatchable in traditional sense. So we need to think about it. It doesn't have to be hydrogen. It could be biomass or other clean energy sources, but that's a really key important issue for Japan. And the last, I think basically I'm sort of in my framework, I found something similar here. But this study looked at 2 degree or 1 degree, 1.5 degree pathways in Japan. And then now you see, different the emissions by different sectors, industry, buildings, transportation, energy supply. Energy gets, this is mostly power sector, but it's zero emissions or negative emissions. And transportation buildings, they get decarbonized quite a lot. But the industry, there will be some emissions from the industry. So that's the hardest, sort of hard decarbonized sector, the important sector for Japan. So these I've shown the insights from the individual model studies, but now switch gears and talk about our the multi-model study. And we already published a pilot study in a journal called Energy. And today I'm going to show tentative results. So it's not finalized yet, and but it will be. We will finish up this study quite so. Right, then go next slide. Yeah. So there have been many multi-modal studies especially in Europe and in the United States, and we did something similar in the run-up to COP20, COP15, and the Copenhagen, and COP24, and the same was true for COP21 Paris. But these things were, so in the US and Europe, it was an academic exercise. So these studies led to the special issues in journals as energy economics and journals climate change economics. It did something similar in 2009, but it was more like a policy process. Political processes. We started, the government said what's called a commit on the midterm, and they assembled a group of modeling teams, and they asked modeling teams to do analysis. Unfortunately, the results were not published, and not even as policy report. You can't even go to the Japanese government website. You can't find a nice report. There are a lot of slides, but it's not organized. It's a nice manner. So it resulted in a book, but that the book was not written in an academic way. So I think very few people outside cite this work, and the insights were a bit lost. It was it was a sad, so it is important for Japan to gain insights, because if you will see the result in a minute, that the models are everywhere. Models differ greatly on certain metrics like cost. And if you focus on single model, then you can pick up certain single model. You can say there are multiple models in the Japanese research community. So you find a certain cheap model, so that the low carbon price. You can say, reducing emissions in Japan is not expensive. But at the same time, there are models with high carbon prices. So if you find that model and use that model, you can just, the reducing emission in Japan is costly. So probably Japan should not do much. That's not true scientifically. What's true in scientifically, there's an uncertainty. And given this range, we have to compare maybe Japan against European Union or United States. But it has been done that in Japan, we haven't done this until our project. So this project forced to systematically compare different models against the multimodal results from other models. we can't simply, one of the reasons why we need this kind of studies, we have to focus, we have to think about our own, the situations. So in terms of renewable, we have less and downs and our costs are higher. So this is the results from PIC. I think it didn't show the rest, but so it shows how much of the 2100 destination could be moved by solar photovoltaic PV in each region. And you don't have to pay attention to dollar, but look at vertical bar. Japan, we can only support 20% of electric generation, 29 to solely with solar PV. This calculation is based on certain criteria. I'm sure they have excluded the areas like national parks, the environmentally sensitive areas from the solar PV generation. We have enough land, but for instance, we cover a certain island, the Shikoku, then perhaps we can generate the electricity to power the entire Japan. But compared to other countries, suddenly we have less endowments. As is true for wind too. So actually, I already talked about this, but this one motivation for Japan to explore the opportunity to import clean energy from abroad. Another thing I will emphasize this point already. The energy structure is similar to G20 average down to G7 average. So this is the industry sector. So the in terms of finalization share, it's about 40%. So it's a significant sector because we have still retain heavy industry. So we have to think about things, and that's why we see this project start energy modeling forum 2025 is called Japan into Comparison Project to JAME. And so our objective to analyze long-term climate for Japan. And I'm sort of the main coordinator. We have 4 people on the steering committee, and the co-funding, as I said, it comes from the Ministry of Energy Japan. We have 5 models. One is general equivalent model, 4 are bottom models. So we are bottom heavy. And we are planning on a special issue in journal sustainability science next year. This is the 10th birthday of the Fukushima disaster. I just skipped these. I just wanted to say we had some tool to improve our analysis. So more on the detailed models, we have AIM-CGG, AIM-induced DNA21, IEJ times Japan. This is another example list of all the models active in Japan. This is a decent coverage, and we have the both. If you will, we have both of them. Ministry economy side represented on the Ministry of the Environment represented, to be neutral. And we have one model is general based on the general equilibrium concept. The other the partial equilibrium. These are you could argue this is more on our results as biased to the energy systems models, the economic models. And yeah, this is the temperature treatment in temporal. And we have harmonized the things like population and the GDP growth rates. And we so you will see in a minute. You will see you will find the models everywhere. But I picked some slide that I emphasize aspects. In reality, models do agree on certain aspects, and this is appreciated in the research community. Probably I don't have to say much about that. First, the sector has to decarbonize. That's the sort of the first priority, and this we find that also true in our study. So regardless of the modeling framework, basically all the models suggested that the power electricity generation has to go to zero emissions or close to zero emissions. And on the end user side, we will see a huge of electrification. Actual level of electrification differs also to model, but it's quite a significant trend. And one person is to have a close look at it, and of course the efficiency will significantly improve in the future. Another thing, is that it's not just the one model I talked about. It was the results I showed was use that industry decarbonization is difficult across models except for the economic model. And this is, I would say, consistent with the policy of the current Abe administration. So, of course, we could see the change in administration next year. I think it's his term. But who knows? And so we currently pursue our current trend. This is what we have to face in the future. The models trend results, for instance, in terms of power generation, some models favor renewables, others favor CCS in nuclear. And so there's no single answer to it. And the most simple perhaps the most important thing is the cost vary greatly from model to model. And some people like to say that it's costly to reduce emissions in Japan, and other people like to reduce the emissions more. The reality is it's uncertain. So this is a half not the result, but it's actually is. I would say that so now see the emissions of CO2 emissions for 5 models, and so NCG, and these models are presented by different cells, and then you see the colors. So this scenario corresponds to no climate policy scenario. The policy is 80% emission reduction. And in the baseline, the models show very different emission in the future. And this one, this is from NEK, the Energy Economics Institute. So they actually pay great attention to the macroeconomic and the econometric modeling of the demand. And so they on the other hand, you see a CGG showing a very high emissions into the future, and the sad thing is this is a factor in socioeconomic modeling. There's no objective way to tell which model is better. So that's one of the reasons why we need to employ multiple models. And in the short term, or around 2020, there might be better way to indicate the strengths and weaknesses of each model. And now we are talking about 2050, and definitely there's no way to tell which is better than others. Of course, in the policy scenario, the model show a decreasing trend. That's what we have imposed. This is the main result. First, so these are the previous EMF studies, Stanford Animal and Farm studies. So I picked up some numbers from these, and this shows, of course, the ranges. Several models have participated in the past. So said for the US, like 100 to about 500 US dollars, 2050. And I shifted the line so that you can see. So this for actually for 2050, and this is for European Union, and again with the 2050. You can see the Japanese numbers here. So this model shows a particularly low marginal cost of abatement, and you can go up to close to 1,500 US per ton of CO2, and you can see definitely there's firstly, there's a great range of the marginal cost of abatement. Secondly, our cost is to be higher than that of the United States and be comparable to the European Union. So this is why you need to employ multiple models, because some people, the environmentalists, they like to focus on this number, and the industrialists like to focus on that number. That's not either is true. You have to look at the entire range. And based on this range, we have to come up with policy design. And I think to speed up the feasibility. So this is the previously look at the 80% reduction scenario, the offshore goal of the government. But there's a lot to talk about net emissions and net zero emissions these days. And this year, the government is expected to ratchet up its policy. So we start looking at we did the sensitivity analysis on the 2050 emissions, so 70%, 90%, and 100%. And this shows the feasibility matrix. Feasibility is a technical term. So whether if a model can show a solution, then it's called feasible. For instance, so AMCGE, if they impose 100% emissions reduction by 2050, the model does show a solution to this problem. It's considered to be feasible. If you use aim and use, then when they impose a 100% emission reduction, then the model could not show the result solution to this constraint. And so does that mean it is really infeasible to emission reduction by 1% in 2050? No, because the model does always improve the models and then include more technologies, more flexibilities, and but they are not lazy either. So they have done some decent amount of efforts to incorporate sort of conceivable technologies, conceivable many policy features. And under this current modeling configuration, this aim and use doesn't show any results. So that means we have to think more, more about exotic solutions, like import biomass energy from abroad, and combining with capture and storage, and going for negative emissions. Yeah, and these are also true for these two models. But it is quite difficult. And also in the models, if you see it in feasibility, you can think of it as sort of an infinite expensive carbon price. So carbon price goes to infinite. Of course, that's a sort of a technical concept, but it again suggests that the carbon margin cost of abatement for these targets is very expensive. This with if we only about the currently available technologies, or sorry, yeah. And I think I should have changed the order of slides. So this is the summary of the cost. So I took from 0 times series of the carbon price. I took the calculated this discounted value of the carbon price. And yeah, so you can see, you don't see only 2 dots here because, like I said, the only 2 model feasible solutions for the 100% net zero scenario. But you can see from here 80% emission reduction to 90%. You can see a huge increase in price for model M and use, and the. So and this one doesn't show the result, but it means it's going to infinity. So the point is we have to be very careful when designing a policy for let's say 9% emission reduction. So for instance, Japan could buy carbon credits from other countries, or we can import bioenergy and combine it with the CCS, or we could do direct air capture and combine it with the CCS in somewhere, perhaps in western part of India, and it treat it as the Japanese emission reduction. Of course, there is one issue in UNFCCC or Paris Agreement negotiation. So that's one of the reasons that they are not significant agreement in COP25 Madrid last year. But the Paris Agreement has an article, a clause on emissions trading, international emissions trading. So I think this suggests the results here suggest we Japanese have to think very clearly, very carefully about the possibility of emission trading. And I think I should go back. Oh, sorry. What about the power generation mix? This is one area where models greatly. So please focus on this policy case. So it's 80% reduction cases, and some models which are huge. The nuclear, the other field is huge penetration of renewables, and these some portions coming from CCS. It's a rather busy graph, and you can just gas, natural gas, CCS, and not just without CCS. But mostly in 2050, this sector gets decarbonized, mostly CCS. If it's fossil fuel. I would like to draw your attention to this purple rectangle. And in this model, actually, they don't model CCS because they think CCS is not socially acceptable in Japan. That's one interpretation of the current situation. And if you believe in kind of world, and Japan kind of won't be able to use CCS, carbon capture storage. So what else should we do? This actually a purple bar represents the hydrogen imported from places like Australia. So zero emission hydrogen. It doesn't have to be coming from Australia. But there are a lot of projects going between. And actually, there's an idea to import hydrogen from Middle East. But this zero emission hydrogen is an import source of power generation. Let me repeat, this is for power generation, not for FC vehicles or fuel cell vehicles or anything like that. And this also, I think for is also hydrogen. So it's a tiny piece, but even if the amount is small, it contributes significantly to the cost minimization. So that's why these models have the hydrogen. Another takeaway from this year is that although technically speaking, a 100% renewable energy power mix is possible, no model does such a mix. And this is because I think it's expensive to go for 100% renewables. Under the current trajectory of the innovation, maybe this is more underestimating the possibility of renewables. It's possible, but I didn't talk about it. But the Japanese renewables are expensive, much more expensive than other countries, and if you do a learning curve and extrapolate the cost in the future, the renewables may not be the cheapest source of electricity, depending on how the thing will evolve in the future. So that's another takeaway. And I think I would like to sum up in a shortly, but yeah, this is another main results I explained. I already explained the importance of extreme decarbonization. So basically, I'm showing in the with the four models. AMC it's on a computable general equilibrium framework. So it changed the economic composition of its Japanese economy. So it's in this model possible to hollow out the heavy industry. So for instance, kick out heavy steel making into China, for instance. And if that is the case, in the industry that is share continues to shrink with the total energy consumption. For other models, these are energy systems models. So they have fixed the source demand does not change appreciably under climate scenarios. So if that's the case, then the other actually sectors, for instance, this and use, you can see huge decrease in energy for buildings and transportation. That happens. For instance, if you switch gasoline car internal engine to electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are much more energy efficient, so you can reduce the energy consumption. And that's true for the building sector. That doesn't happen greatly the heavy industry. So that will stand to even more and increase the importance of the industry even more into the future. Yeah, and if you have more elaborate studies to confirm this point, and actually it's a heavy industry is a key sector, and actually that's a very from the modeling perspective, it's quite difficult to. So I think if I recall correctly, Europe released one point, it's a Clean Planet for All report recently, and they significantly improved the demo capability of the industry. So it is at the cutting edge of research. We have, I think that's definitely something an area to explore more. I skip these stars. I think this is my last slide, and I talked about Japan modeling project, but there are other studies happening in Asia. So China, they ran what's the China Energy Modeling Forum a couple of years, several years, and it's been led by Tsinghua University, and they have I think they have done already one special issue. they are another special pipeline in the energy economics. And in India, some people got together. They published a paper on transportation, and there's a idea for Asian model energy modeling for up for the discussion, and we're not sure which to include, but definitely we are discussing this with my Asian colleagues. And so I'm now in Australia. Maybe it would be interesting to think about something like Asia-Pacific model into comparison. So thank you very much, and I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks, Masa. So we've got about 15 minutes for questions. So the floor's open. Yeah.
Thanks, Masa. That was really interesting. So given the contribution of hydrogen in some of those 2050 plans, is there talk in Japan or push or, I guess, certification or accreditation of hydrogen as being green or blue brown? And I guess the reason to Australia pursue hydrogen that isn't zero emissions.
That's a very excellent question, and I never heard of that station issue. Now you're right, of course. Right now, the idea to get the hydrogen from brown coal, that's not going to be so environmental friendly. So, but I think what I'm more concerned about is that in Japan we've seen a hype cycle of hydrogen. So there was a huge research project, the WeNet. So the idea of, I think in some sub-projects of that big WeNet project, the idea of to generate hydrogen in the part of South America, and it can carry all the way to Japan, long distance for the transport of hydrogen. And if you do the economic calculation, it's costly. For obvious reasons, and maybe we are seeing the hype cycle here again. I didn't talk about much, but there's a lot of interest in doing a demonstration project here in Australia, and but I think we should be clever. We definitely like hydrogen is really important. So we should we are hosting the Olympic Games in 2020 here in Tokyo, and the Olympic, Olympic towns, village, you will see fuel vehicles, buses, running around. That's gonna be quite, and also even then the torch will be hydro-fired, if I call it. That sounds like high. So I think we need to have a more long-term clever strategy, because hydrogen is really like models indicate. I stop.
Yes, at the back.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. Following up on the hydrogen hype question, maybe you could go back to the slide, please, where you indicate power generation shares in the different, yes, this one. So comparing the upper left one and the lower one, we see that obviously the availability of domestic renewables is not so much an issue to drive the hydrogen, the tiny hydrogen part in the lower one, because in the policy scenario in the upper one, you see there is lots of solar and wind available. So it has to do with either the relative costs of these two technologies or some deviating assumption in the lower study. Could you please explain a bit more how that happens?
So the issue has to do with dispatchability. It simply boils down to that. So the hydrogen power plants, when you can generate electricity from hydrogen anytime you like, that's not just solar or wind. So you can really reduce the cost of the solar and the wind. But there's a period called the doldrums, where there's no sunshine and no wind. So basically, almost very small generation coming from a variable renewables. If we envision the current generation solar and wind technologies, so that's the period when we have to rely on hydrogen greatly. And in this model, so this is they have gas with CS, so that's dispatchable electric generation source. these models have totally different electricity demand. That's one of the reasons you see a huge, generation from wind. But either you have to have CCS or some biomass power generation or some hydrogen power generation, because that's the dispatchable source. And the period of drum lasts for several days. So you can do. You can cope with this with the batteries, but the size of battery is really going to be enormous. It's not that and several hour battery capacity. We are talking about days or even. So that's, I think, as far as I understand, that's the reason.
So if I may follow up question, so the hydrogen as the hydrogen in the lower left panel does substitute so much of the wind in the upper panel, but rather dispatchable generation capacity.
Yeah, I think
okay,
so. I
thanks.
think so.
Okay.
And also, there's a lot of energy considerations going in the models. So, by the way, this is tricky, but this is not hydrogen actually. I think they use, I forgot what the detail is. This model doesn't use the import to the hydrogen. So something else.
Thank you. Fascinating talk. I had a talk with the unfortunately passed away Steve Sawyer at one point, and we were talking about the onshore wind energy potentials about and having seen itself, it is incredibly difficult to get these large turbines through narrow infrastructure, road, etc. So the Panacea was up last year, and there are a few pre-commercial pipe projects now underway. Is a offshore floating wind. Which of these models do you include it? Does the AMCG model include offshore floating wind? What are the cost projections for that technology, or is typhoons that Japan and Scotland, are they prohibited for that?
Good question. Sorry, I don't remember the detail of each modeling, but you are taught, depending on how we model how models the offshore wind, the resources of wind vary greatly, and that's one of the biggest uncertainties we face in terms of these things. But I don't think that's the biggest question here. Actually, I'm not showing the results, but where we have a sensitivity analysis, we intentionally change the resources for wind by a factor of 2. And you don't get much in the power combustion, power generation mix for all these models. So of course, there are many different considerations. By the way, so resource availability is something. The other is cost. And of course, if you change the cost, you see quite different results. But the cost is quite tricky, so I didn't provide it. But even solar in Japan is expensive. So our solar PV costs double the German price, and we have been paying second trillions of yen every year to support the introduction of solar. And our solar panels come from China mostly. But still, our solar system, installed solar system, is very expensive. And we had a discussion yesterday. So Lynn pointed out we have very cheap solar plants, very in number, Japan. So it's the cost. It's all possible, but that's sort of the edge of the tail. Not tail, but the cheap edge of the distribution. So if the average price hugely expensive compared to other regions. So that's and I'm not sure what's going to happen to Japan. So offshore wind, yes, right. We started got seriously about the offshore wind. We have a new legislation to our sort of the property rights for the developers of the piece of ocean, and so we are encouraging, government is encouraging the development of wind. But the key question is the cost of renewables, and that is also supported modeling analysis. And I'm a bit sort of optimistic of a cost prospect, because I think the Japanese government doesn't want to see many foreign developers from coming to Japan. We'd like to have in this we think of as a manufacturing country. Like to see Japanese wind turbines. And we don't have many or turbines or developers, and that's one of the reasons why our costs continue to be high. One of the reasons, but there are very few studies on the cost issues. So, and the Japanese government. So I use an example of solar. So the government has a huge press data of the solar projects, but they don't release it. So no external research can say, and the government even doesn't contract out the research to externals like a researcher. They can do closed analysis, and then they can keep the analysis and the data to themselves. They don't even do that. So nobody knows why Japanese solar PV is expensive, and probably I would get that we won't know why Japanese offshore wind is going to be expensive.
We've got 2 more, so let's take them now because 3 questions. So why don't we 4 more questions. Okay. Why don't we take 2 and see how we go? If you could keep them short, because we've just got a few minutes, and then we'll take the last 2 if we can.
Thank you very much. Just on the cost question, do you have any idea of the Japanese public attitudes towards the cost? What kind of appetite is there for acceptance for these strategies, given that potentially they're in effect on electricity prices or tax increases? What's the public attitude towards that?
Great. Should we take the 2 questions together?
One more.
Thanks for that. That was great. I just wanted to get clarity. Maybe I missed it in the presentation. So, what's the assumption about technology scale where the technology is not yet proven at scale? What are the assumptions in the model about economic growth? Do they all assume that there will be and should be economic growth?
I think that's so I will answer this question first, so it's easier. So at scale, that's a good question, and I think all the models are making an optimistic assumption. The things like CCS, for instance. So yeah, we have a such a project. We have had a couple of different projects of CCS in Japan. One is about to complete in Hokkaido, and but the question is would it cost and yeah, it's been tough for the Japanese government to find the proper location for CCS and the geological storage, and given this, it's a cost. It's gonna be quite expensive, right? But all the models are sort of relatively optimistic costs based on the published literature, of course. These are more literature. What's the other one? I forgot it. Oh, that's a great question. Strange thing with Japan is that we don't have public discourse on energy, or so it's extremely difficult for me to explain foreigners, because this is so we are democracy, but are we really full democracy? I don't know, because there we have very few number of think tanks. We have very number of environmental NGOs, and we don't have. Some people are always debating ministries and some powerful interest groups, and the small number of environmental NGOs. But personally, people are not interested in climate change, really. Because it doesn't show up in sort of parliamentary debates. It does, very on a few occasions, but it's not featured much. And only I don't quite understand, but partly because people are not interested in climate change, people are not much interested in renewables either. So people are actually worried about nuclear safety, something, but so there's not like clear public attitude toward, of course, here about cost electricity bill, but as a public policy issue, I don't think there's a very good idea among the public about what to do with renewables and what cost. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing you could maybe say is, at least when the government is that they want to reduce the feed-in tariff rates relatively aggressively, or shift to a feed premium, as they're talking about, that the justification for doing so, the exploding cost of the feed-in tariff on household electricity bills. The
Yeah,
government sees some risk around households getting upset about electricity bills and is trying to build a policy to deal with that.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the few countries that are not seeing I think that's I'm confused. You're right. It's a concern, especially like low income people, but it's not. I mean, there's not public space discursive in which people talk about it openly. So very few people talk about it.
So we've reached the end of time. So what I'd like to do is thank Masa, and then Masa we have a little time afterwards. You have an additional question. I'm sure he'd be happy to to chat about your question afterwards. But for now, let's thank Masa for a great talk.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, just before everyone leaves the room, our seminar series is back in swing for 2020. Two upcoming seminars. One next Friday. Our guest, Dr. Wolf-Peter Schill, Calvin Say, will be presenting on the impact of PV and storage on the grid. So it's next Friday, outside of our usual Wednesday time slot. And the following Monday, have a seminar on industrial demand response. So keep an eye on our website and on Twitter. And as I said, we'd love to welcome you again. Thank you.